I think a lot of people live paycheck to paycheck, just living month to month. They don't really think outside of those months. They're just trying to like survive. Nothing's going to change until like you actually have like a bigger goal to do so.
Is there any unnecessary spending that I could be putting towards this debt? Especially when you frame it like this debt is killing me. You have to have so much clarity over everything. Otherwise, like the debt's not going to go anywhere.
If you want things to be different, you're going to have to make some changes to get to that next level or get to the next stage of life where you're not feeling anxiety, guilt of all these things, right?
How are people ending up in thousands of dollars of debt? And what can you do when it finally feels like there's no way out? Welcome back to the show, everyone. Lauren and I are back for our weekly episode where we talk all things money, from getting out of debt, budgeting, investing, and all the other crazy things going on in the world of finance. Now, Lauren, I heard that you had a bit of a surprise this tax season. So why don't you tell us what's been going on?
Quite the surprise, Nick. So, we were doing our taxes just on Sunday, and we waited for a long time because my husband, he's in college athletics, like their season was finally over. So he was like, he had a week off. So we were like, okay, cool. We're going to do this over the weekend. So our taxes are pretty easy. Like we each have like, well, he started a new job in the middle of the year. So he had like 2 W-2s. I had a W-2. And then just a few things from like our investment accounts and stuff. So pretty simple taxes. So we got on TurboTax like we normally do. We did it last year. And last year we got like an $800 return. So I was like, okay, like I just, thought it would be pretty similar. So we're starting to put our income in and like finish off our W-2s. And before we go to the next step, it said your estimated, like what you owe in taxes. And, I was expecting it to be like, nothing, you get a refund. And it said $5,600. And I was like, oh my gosh, so we were like immediately kind of thrown off because not much had changed. Like, so we thought, and so we had to go through the numbers and like, we actually got somebody on the phone, like a TurboTax professional, just to take a look at it. But essentially our income went up like total $40,000 for the year. And that doesn't seem like a lot, but apparently like our tax rate was still like the same. And we were only paying taxes like for what we made last year. And so since it went up the 40 grand, like we didn't pay the taxes for that. And so we were off by like $6,000 on our taxes, which is crazy. Like I was feeling like, is this right? Is this wrong? Like, how did this happen? I've never had a problem with like not having enough taken out. Now, this is only, I think our second year, like, no, third year filing jointly, married filing jointly. So like, previously, it was always by myself. I always had enough taken out, but now you have to kind of, think about your total income and like the tax rate that you're going to be in there. So I think that's where we were off. So I had on my to-do list is, talking to my employer, making sure we have enough coming out. So this doesn't happen next year. Either way, my husband was like, we're either going to pay it now or we're going to pay it throughout the year because it's all, taxes. But I didn't know that you can actually get like you can get a penalty for not paying enough in throughout the year. So we're definitely going to make sure that we get that taken care of. But we didn't get the penalty this year, thank goodness. But that was quite a learning lesson for me. I've never had that issue before, but we do have the money set aside, which is a good thing. So everything is good on that front, but it was just quite a surprise. I just had no idea. We went from 800. I was thinking, maybe the other direction, maybe we owe 1,000, but suddenly we owe like 5,500. So yeah, that's kind of where we're at.
That's a fun surprise.
Yeah. Fun surprise.
Oh, man.
Yeah. So it wasn't the best, but, yeah, we figured it out, but now we know what we need to do in the future. So learning lesson for us, but whatever.
I mean, not to brag, but I did have so I don't get like a refund. Yeah. I get like excess amounts of savings that I had set aside for taxes. There was a pretty healthy amount left over, which I was stoked about. Yeah. And talking to my CPA, he was like, yeah, well, because this is our first year filing jointly. He's like, her excess paid off some of yours. And then I also had higher quarterly payments. Self-employed, you have to pay quarterly for taxes. And he's like, because that was higher than the previous year, he's like, you really only owe $1,800. And I was like, heck yeah. Like last year I owed like 3 or 4 grand. And so I had a pretty penny left over in my high yield savings account with extra tax savings. So that was a nice surprise. But, I'm curious, do you think like a $5,600 tax bill at the end of the year is a pretty hefty amount? Like, I don't care who it is, right? Mm-hmm. Do you feel like, I don't know, do you feel like most Americans would be prepared for a situation like that where they owed $5,600 at the end of the year?
No, absolutely not. I don't think so. Unless they had a little bit of savings for like emergency funds or something. I don't think so. I've told you before, like we keep a little like slush fund for ourselves. So like that money came straight out of the slush fund. We did not set aside taxes because we didn't know this was going to be a thing. But yeah, I don't think that the average American, the average American's in credit card debt and, has all these different debts and, no savings. So no, they're not going to be prepared for something like this, which is scary because that's money you owe to the federal government. Like you have to pay it.
Oh yeah. It's like the worst debt you can have because they have access to everything and anything and they want their money.
Yep.
And they charge interest as well for those who don't know, but
they'll pull it out of your paycheck,
Exactly. Yeah. They'll garnish those wages real quick. But it's tough because I feel like most people just are of the belief like, oh, my employer handles it. Like I feel like most people don't have the awareness around how their taxes work to even understand like why that could even happen, and so planning for that's almost just out of the question, I would say, for most people. But it sucks because the way that taxes are set up now, you almost don't have to pay attention to it until tax season comes. And from one perspective, that is nice, right? But on the other hand, like you should have full awareness of it. And a lot of people you'll notice, especially around tax season, are like, I can't wait for that refund to hit. And it's like, no, like you should ideally, like you had said last year, you got like an $800 refund. Yeah. Like that's a pretty ideal situation if you can get less than $1,000 as a refund, because that means you kept as much money as you possibly could throughout the year. Like you don't want to be in the scenario where you're getting a couple $1,000s back, and the government was just holding onto your money interest free and just using it as they needed to. And so it's a complicated season for a lot of people, but that $5,600 tax bill would just crush a lot of people.
Oh yeah. And I'm not even sure where people would go if they didn't have anything in savings. They'd probably have to, I don't know if I think the IRS does like some type of payment plan, that they could get you on for that, but that would just be like, that's another debt on top of your credit cards and your car and your student loans. It's just one thing that you really don't need. So I guess that was a big wake up call for me, because it seemed like we looked at both of the tax rates that like our employers were taking out, and it was like normal. But the problem is like our income combined knocked us up to like the next tax bracket. So like it wasn't enough for what we were pulling out individually. Like say we weren't married still, like it probably would have been fine and we would have been right where we were last year. But it's just we, made a little bit more last year and it just wasn't there. So big learning lesson for me. I've never had that happen in all of my years of doing taxes. So yeah.
Do you think people treat like different types of debt differently? Like for example, like, okay, a tax debt is one kind. Do you think that someone may treat that differently than, let's say, like a credit card or even like a mortgage? I don't know. Do you feel like people approach those debts differently?
Oh, I think so. Like if someone randomly got like a tax bill like I just did, I feel like that, like we just talked about, the IRS is scary. Like you can't not pay them because they're going to get paid anyway. They're going to garnish your wages. They have every right to do so. So I feel like if this were to happen to the everyday person, they would probably like just stop paying their credit cards and just like focus on paying on that tax debt and just be like, you know what, their credit cards can go to collections or, tank my credit score, whatever. But I cannot let the federal government like come in and start garnishing wages from me. Like I have to pay them. Like that is something I cannot, can't do,
Yeah, it almost kind of ties into this idea of like people looking at debts as like there's good debt and there's bad debt. Yeah. And like I feel like I've always like hated looking at it through that lens. Like there's inherently good debt or inherently bad debt. Like there's no morality behind debt, right? Like debt is debt. I always look at it as like debt's either useful or harmful, right? Yeah. Like credit card debt, very harmful. A mortgage in most cases, if done right, pretty useful, and you could even make the same argument for like a car loan. If you approach it the right way, it's not such a huge part of your world. It's proportionate to what your income is. Cool. That's pretty useful debt then. But like credit cards or even like a tax bill that you have to pay off throughout the rest of the year, like that's not helping you in any way. It's not accomplishing anything real in your life. How have you looked at like that conversation of good versus bad debt?
Yeah. And I think where that good debt, bad debt comes from is like all of the like financial people out there that talk about it that way. Like, good debt is always the mortgage, bad debt is always credit cards. And I think a lot of people also consider bad debt like student loans and stuff. I consider that, like you said, in the right circumstance. Like if you went for, to a school that was affordable for a good quality degree that's going to get you a good income afterwards, I think that can be a good debt for you. You know what I mean? But I agree. I think in the grand scheme of things, like when we think about it in good versus bad, it's just like, it's shameful almost when you think about like your bad debt. You know what I mean? Like I try to view it as just like neutral, like it is what it is. And, it's not going to affect who I am as a person. You can learn from your past mistakes and then move forward from them. I try to just like take the emotions out of it. That's what I had to do whenever I was paying off my debt. I was just like, you know what? I did what I thought was the right decision at the time. You know, I always say that, like, I think we make decisions like with the information we have at the time. So for me, I was like, you know what? It is what it is. I'm learning and I'm going to move forward and pay this off. So that's how I always approach it. I hate the whole, I understand what you mean. It's useful or it's harmful. You know, bad debt is a lot of interest. Usually that's what people are talking about. And I get it, but I just think that those terms are just like a little off for when we're talking about debt.
Yeah, no, you brought up a good point about like student loans as an example, because like student loans are not in one camp or the other, right? You approach student loans the wrong way, you end up with $100,000 worth of debt on a job that maybe starting level is like, you know, $40,000-$50,000 a year. That's pretty bad debt. Versus if you go and you rack up, you know, 150,000, but maybe you come out on the other end like a lawyer or a doctor and you're making like 200 or 300 in a few years, right? Like I'd say that's pretty useful debt, right? Like, so there's levels of there's degrees to this, right? Like there's arguments that you can make for both sides, but I think in general, things like credit card debt are almost always going to be bad debt. Yeah. And, you know, this whole conversation about like good debt versus bad debts or potentially ignoring debts or not even being able to pay them. It kind of reminds me of this video I came across that I wanted to show here where this girl's talking about straight up just like ignoring her debt altogether and saying, oh, it'll just fall off in a few years. And I think there's kind of a mixture of like not understanding how things work entirely, but then also like a healthy level of maybe an unhealthy level, I should say, of optimism for things just won't go bad. So let me go ahead and play that for you.
Credit cards are fake. You can just put $30,000 on a credit card and then not pay it, and then it will fall off your credit after 7 years.
Saucy Sibs tip 24. Credit card debt
is like, it doesn't matter. Like I asked mom and dad at one point, I was like, could I go to jail?
No, because it's not legally binding.
And if they sell it to a collections agencies, aren't allowed to keep calling you. You have to know your rights. Just don't answer and they will write it off. Mine have all fallen off my credit in 2 to 3 years. But here's the thing. You can't get an apartment because we got this apartment because my credit was so good.
And I like didn't have
Nick
credit.
doesn't have credit because he's never had credit.
I'm off grid.
Yeah. Everything in like his life has been cash. But we're building your credit now. So my credit is like, honestly, it's still not that bad.
It's not bad.
It's like 650.
Yeah.
That's not.
Yeah, no, I know. I know someone listening just like, it
hurt them.
Yeah.
But here's the thing, like we're letting mine will build back up in a year.
It's
First of all,
fine.
after everything drops off, it shoots back up and then you're fine. But here's the thing.
And the more credit you get a booster score.
Yeah. So if anyone else credit, they literally wouldn't be able to like do anything in life. So like don't credit. But I did and it was great.
That's fine.
It was like so fun.
It was like so fun.
That is dangerous advice. I don't know about that one. What do you think, Nick?
Like the whole idea that like credit card debt is fake. It's just like, what are you talking about? It's literally just borrowed money with the expectation that you're going to pay it back. And to think like, well, I could just borrow it and then not pay it back and then just ignore the phone calls. Like there's a level of entitlement that has to come along with coming to that conclusion that it's just like, I don't know how you're getting there, you know?
Yeah. And like she kind of threw in there, like, we might not be able to get an apartment, you know? So
yeah,
like,
grazed over that, right?
Yeah, just grazed over that. And I do think, I mean, there's definitely people in the world who live life this way. I don't think I could morally live that way. Just like knowing that I'm taking advantage of something. And like, you know, when you're signing up for these credit cards, you're signing things that are saying that you're like going to pay them back. And I just think for me, like, I just couldn't like live with myself, like knowing that I told somebody I was going to pay them back and then never did. My mom was so good with like her credit card bills growing up. Like we never had credit card debt because she paid it off every month. So I just feel like for me, I just couldn't do that. But it's not as simple as just like, oh, it just like falls off. Like that is so dangerous to say. Like so many things, your credit goes into so many different things. Like how are you ever get an apartment? How are you going to get a home someday? Are you ever going to need a car again? Because all of that goes into getting loans for things. Like it's not just like, oh yeah, let me just go and spend $30,000 and just not pay it. And I'll tell you what, yeah, collections agencies, they are going to call you because that's their job to try to get you to pay that. You know, they're going to harass you at all hours of the day and it's going to be miserable. You know, they're going to call people that know you as well. You know, it's wild, but that's a wild approach.
So like credit cards are some of the largest companies in the world, right? And to think that they haven't thought this idea through of like, oh, but what if people don't pay us? What can we do? Like, oh, well, hopefully they just never figure that out, right? Like, no, that's not the case. Like, and granted, there's what can happen. And then there's also the likelihood of that happening, right? Like they can sue you, garnish your wages, force you through court to pay that.
Yes.
And then now there's a conversation you can have about how likely is that. It's probably going to depend on how much debt we're talking about. But like the fact that that's still a possibility, that you could be sued, forced to pay this debt, your wages are garnished, like that's such a huge risk to take. Just to try to take this money free and clear and be like, oh, well, it'll fall off in 2 or 3 years, which I don't know how she got that number, 2 or 3 years. Like, the debt doesn't go away after 2 or 3 years. I mean, and it's not even going to go away after 7 years. It just may not show up on your report anymore if there's been no activity on that. But like the debt is still there. They could be waiting for their moment to be like, all right, we're just going to wait, and then we're going to come and strike, you know, and you could see this happening years down the road. But yeah, that's just, I couldn't tell how serious or not they were with that. They sounded pretty serious, but then in the comments under it, in the comments under it, it was just totally like a laughing matter. I'm like, I don't know if you're getting it right, you know, like.
Yeah, I don't know. I think that goes back to like the whole credit card versus cash thing. Like, credit cards, there's like no emotional attachment. It's just like money that like, it again is sort of fake, you know. It's just like it is borrowed money, right? So you're swiping and you're like, oh, I'll just pay this later when I get paid or whatever. And there's just no emotional attachment to it. Rather than like taking money out of your own bank account and like handing it over, you're like shaking, like this is my money. You know what I mean? But I don't know. So I think that's where a lot of people get that from. I don't know. We really need like financial education in schools, because like how are people going into their adult lives like thinking these things? It's wild.
Crazy.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's crazy the lack of education there is around some of these more simpler areas of managing your finances. Like, how does a credit card work? Like, how can you set up a simple budget just to understand, are you spending within your means? Like little things like that I don't think are too complex for people in high school to learn, like are just so useful and they're not taught. And it was funny. I was watching this Caleb Hammer episode. I love watching Caleb Hammer videos when I like make dinner or wash the dishes or something. And he was talking about like, there was this person on there and they just kept saying, well, like, I'm young, you know, I just don't know. And he's like, well, first of all, you're 23, like you've been an adult for 5 years. And there's this whole like idea of like the younger generations now. What is the word he used? Like infantilizing themselves, where like, oh, I'm just so young. Like I'm 25. I'm still super young. Like as an excuse for why like your shit isn't together. And like, look, I get it. You know, if you go to college, that's almost, you know, depending on who you are, where you go, that can be somewhat of an extension of high school for a lot of people, you know? And so you come out really becoming an adult at 22. But like, even at that point, like having been an adult for 4 years, with how much information there is online and how much knowledge there is of how bad these situations could be, like it's hard for that to be an excuse, you know, at least in my mind, it's hard for that to be a valid excuse.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. I mean, with anything, it's like, okay, we literally live in a time where you can Google and YouTube literally anything, you know what I mean? So the excuse isn't there. I don't know. This person talking about this, just, it made me anxious, because I'm like, like your credit and like crashing your credit that bad. Like she said, her score is good. It's better now at 650. Like I wouldn't consider that good. I mean, people who are building up, that's fine. Also, I don't think she understands how long it takes to build credit back up, like to get to like the good and the excellent levels. Like it takes years of good, like repayment of debt and things like that. You're not going to have $30,000 in credit card debt go into collections and then just expect to have like a 750 score after like a year or two. It's not going to happen. And if you're doing that on a credit card, you're probably just have like shitty spending habits regardless.
Oh, so, all throughout the rest of your life, right?
Yeah. So your credit score is literally gonna be like 400. You know what I mean? So, I don't know.
Yeah. Now I will say the one thing in there that is correct. You're not going to go to jail for it. And so maybe that's kind of like your threshold for how severe is this? Well, can I go to jail for it? No, then it's not that bad. You know, that's the only thing I can kind of see. But like definitely glazed over some of the details for how this would work if you just took out $30,000 of debt and never paid it back. You know, these companies are not dumb. No. You know, they know these tricks, and they know there's a lot more ways to get that money back from you. Than how easy it would be for you to like kind of skirt the guardrails, I guess. Yeah.
I mean, that made me think of something. So I know you can go to jail for like writing bad checks and stuff like that. So like, I guess it's just different because like, it's not really your money. I don't know how it works, but like, you know, you can go to jail for other things, but like, it seems like this would be the same. I just don't know how, you know, you're saying like, oh, I'm going to pay this back. And then you don't, especially at like $30,000. That's a lot of things. What did you buy first off? But like, that seems like a lot of money to just be like, oh, I don't have to pay it back, So I don't know.
Yeah, $30,000 is an absurd amount of money. And what was more concerning was the amount of people in the comments who were there was only two sides. It was either they were totally agreeing with it, like, yeah, you cracked the system, or they were like, you're an idiot. Like, this is not how it works. So it's crazy to see that, I guess, level of polarization between, do you believe this or not?
Yeah. Well, I guess on the other side of things, someone who does get into debt and then wants to actually pay it off and not just have it roll off of their, whatever their account, their credit. The first question we have is, this debt is killing me. What can I do? So I'm 24 years old and stuck with nearly 20,000 of debt. 2 credit cards maxed out, totaling about 9,000, about 5,000 in student loan debt, and another 5,000 across a handful of different collections accounts. Some of this was due to bad financial decisions, but a lot of it was from struggling to pay bills while living on my own. I'm making more money now, but it feels like every time I turn around, I owe more money and I can't keep up. I make my payments every month, but by the next payment, the interest piles on and I can't seem to make a dent. I need to get this paid off, but it's starting to feel impossible. I don't have anything in savings and it's been a constant stress on my life. Should I look into debt consolidation? Are there programs that can help? I just don't know what to do at this point.
$20,000 at 24 years old, and a good chunk of that being credit cards or in collections. Like that's an unfortunate situation. And I have so much more sympathy for people who are in these tough situations because they were trying to make ends meet and their income just didn't stretch far enough, as opposed to the person who ends up in this place because of just poor spending habits and living beyond their means. But yeah, this is a tough situation. And yeah, I think having awareness of where all these debts are at, like that's definitely step number one. But getting a better sense of how did this really happen? Like, was it truly because I just wasn't making enough money? Like, you got to assess how you ended up in this situation. Like, if it's really because you weren't making enough money, rent had to be paid out of your checking, and so groceries had to be purchased on a credit card, like that. Okay, you can understand that. And now if you're making more money, like this person said, okay, we can avoid that moving forward. But yeah, you really got to audit, like, how did this happen in your life? Like, is there a possibility that this happened because you were spending on things that you didn't need to? I think if you can get clarity on that, like that's where what you're going to need to address first, right? That's going to tell you where the issue was and then how to find a solution for that.
Yeah, for sure. Cause I'm like, I get this. Cause whenever I was first out of college, I think I've told you and I've said on here before, but I had to work a full-time job and then my rent was $850 a month and it was a studio apartment. And I was making I'm not kidding you, $34,000 a year. And so that rent was probably like half of my paycheck. And I still had a car payment and stuff like that. So I actually had to work part-time at like a psychiatric hospital and I did the overnight shift there. So I was able to afford my life. So I get this. I totally understand. And it sucks to struggle just to like pay bills to live, But I'm just curious, like, is this person like do they actually know like where their money's going? Like, you know what I mean? Like, I'm not questioning that. I'm sure that there's a lot of stuff going on here, but like sometimes if we aren't paying attention, if we're not budgeting, things can be going out that doesn't really need to be going out. You know what I mean? Whether that's random purchases here and there, eating out, because you're busy and stuff like that. Like I get it. But sometimes I wonder, like, are we being like not truthful, because I just think we just, whatever we're thinking, that's what our thoughts are on it. But like, I don't know. Do we actually know the truth here? Like, was it from actually struggling to pay bills, or like, was it just a little bit of like wonky spending, Yeah. You said sort of bad financial decisions, but also like, I don't know. I think there could be a mix of both of those, but probably having a good handle on your finances to start is, it seems like they know where their debt is, but like now, like, where's your actual money going? And then let's start there,
Oh, 100%. And I feel like people think that there's like this threshold to where you don't need to pay attention to the money anymore. Yeah. Like, I feel like people think, oh, when I make this much money, then it'll be less important. And now granted, like, there can be a point where like, yeah, okay, I don't need to make sure that I stayed within $500 exactly on groceries. And instead I can really just focus on, am I saving according to my goals, and then is the rest of my spending in line? But like at every point in your income level, like, you should be paying attention to these things. Yeah. There should be awareness of like, at least in general, where is my money going? As you come down levels in income, like, you have to pay even more and more attention. And like, we don't know what this person is making, and it sounds like they're making a little bit more money than when they first started, but I'd imagine they're still in the area where they need like super precise clarity over all of their numbers. Yeah. Like, into that nitty gritty of like, how much am I spending on groceries? How much am I spending on gas? Is there any unnecessary spending that I could be putting towards this debt? Right. Like, and especially when you frame it like this debt is killing me, like you have to have so much clarity over everything. Otherwise, like the debt's not going to go anywhere. Yeah.
And so to like kind of answer their question, you know, what should they do at this point? So for me, like you know, we've talked about this a lot too, but like debt consolidation is something that like, yeah, it can be a great option for people, but I also feel like you don't really learn much from it because it just like, you know, it can be helpful. It can be a tool to like consolidate your debt into like one payment that's more easy for you to pay each month, whatever. But there's no action there on your part. It's just you're taking the debt and you're sort of moving it together, and then you're just like, oh, I did this. And, you know, I think that that's where a lot of people are when they're in debt consolidation. And we see this time and time again, and then they just end up in the same type of cycle that they're in. So that's something that they could look into. But I feel like, Nick, if this 5,000 is already in they said they have 5,000 collections, would you just kind of like set that one aside for now and just like focus on like the 2 credit cards that are at 9,000 and the student loans, and kind of just like the ones, 5,000 is already in collections. Like, should they just let that sit there and try to maybe focus on the 15 and try to get that tackled first? Or like, how would you do it?
Yeah, I was a little torn because on the one hand, like they do have, like you said, the $9,000 in credit card debt seems like to be the most pressing.
Yeah.
And then with the money in collections, like it would be different if they had a couple $1,000s in savings, even like $2,000 or $3,000, right?
Yeah.
Where they could call up those collections companies and say, hey, I'll pay off this debt with this amount, and I need it in writing that this will clear my debt. Because a lot of times they'll take pennies on the dollar to clear your debt because they know, like, once it's gotten to the point where it's sold to a collections company, they've already paid pennies on the dollar. And so maybe you can get your debt like 40-50% off at that stage, but you do need to have cash in hand.
Yeah.
But because it's in 5,000, because that's the 5,000 that is in collections, I would probably focus on the credit cards. Yeah. I'd imagine the student loans, like depending on how recent those loans are, like they're probably not terrible interest rates.
Yeah.
And so maybe they could just make the minimums and then get the collections wiped out, or build up the savings enough to where they could start to negotiate with those credit card companies.
Yeah, for sure. And I feel like, you know, when we talk about debt consolidation, like, and we just worked with someone recently who we, you know, talked about debt consolidation with, and there's 2, so I think we should mention this. There's 2 free resources that are like official. So like people can go to them and actually get like a free counseling session for like debt management, which potentially could be helpful for this person. So it's the FCAA.org and then NFCC.org. So I think those 2 places would be a good spot for the person could actually get some like someone to actually sit down and like look at their numbers with them to see if like debt consolidation or a debt management plan would even be a good option for them at this point.
Yeah, I think those companies are really good resources. I would say, like, in general, when people ask me about like debt consolidation, almost always my response is like, I never like advise it right out of the gate.
No.
Like there has to be so many things in place for me to say, yes, then it's a good idea. And a lot of it has to do around the spending behavior. Cause like you said, if nothing has changed, right, you're just going to end up in the exact same position, right? Like you fill up your credit cards and then all of a sudden you shift it over to a personal loan, or a debt consolidation company handles that. Now you have those credit cards again with zero balance. And what's the first thing you're going to want to turn to when life gets stressful, or you need to put an expense somewhere, or you don't have enough money in your checking account? You're going to turn back to those credit cards. And it's just such a nasty cycle because you could quickly end up with double the amount of debt that you started with, especially if you go through the route of like a personal loan to pay it off, which a lot of times is my preference if people are going to go that route, if they could do it themselves as opposed to with a company. But yeah, it's so difficult to say that, yes, you should do debt consolidation or that it's always a good option. Like to me, there's so many other things that need to happen to say that.
Yeah.
Now, I guess to bring it back to this person's question, let's say they said, okay, I don't want to do debt consolidation then. And then they got full clarity on like, they put together a solid budget, right? They knew how much, if they didn't have any BS spending, they knew how much they could put towards this debt. What would you say is like the next step that they should take to start working on this?
Yeah, I would probably, because I know that those credit cards are probably at like 25% interest, I'm probably going to like debt avalanche those and focus like my efforts on those first. Because I think $9,000, depending on what this person makes, and maybe they pick up a side hustle right now, like, you know, you made some mistakes and you got to go back and, you know, fix them. So I really would love to see this $9,000 wiped out like super quick, and doing the debt avalanche. So, which means you're focusing on the highest interest rate first. I think you could get this knocked out, you know, if you're focusing on those 2 credit cards. And then I think I'm going to do what you said earlier, potentially then just kind of continue to pay my student loans. You know, we know that probably the interest rate's 6 to 8% probably. So I'm going to continue to pay those like on just like a monthly basis, just whatever my monthly payment is, while I'm building up a savings to potentially offer some offer some money towards those collection accounts. Because like you said, you can sometimes offer them like pennies on the dollar and get that closed off. So that's probably what I would do in the situation. Do you see anything that you would change, Nick, or do differently?
Yeah, I mean, the only thing I'm thinking, and kind of like what we had said earlier about like, you know, depending on how far along you are with having these in collections, they could start pursuing other, you know, like legal routes to get that money from you. And so I guess you kind of have to gauge, you know, how often have they been calling? How serious have they been? Have you answered it? Have you had any communication with them? Because at that point, it might make sense to almost do the reverse, like keep the two credit cards and then the student loans, pay the minimums on those, build up the savings to then pay off what's in collections and then work your way back again. Yeah. The only issue with that is like, if you know, this sounds like this would be this person's first time getting out of debt. Like that's a tough like thing to do right out the gate, because you're not seeing a whole lot of like small wins in terms of like, you know, maybe you pay off one of the small collections, right? Maybe it's like $500 or $1,000 because they said they have a handful. Like that's an awesome win. You'll feel that right away versus like, okay, things are kind of sitting. I'm just trying to pile up some cash. I think that's harder to get motivated about, so to speak. So yeah, but assuming the collection situation wasn't at a terrible point where they're already threatening to sue, I would probably start with the $9,000, then save up some money to offer to those collection companies. The student loans, like $5,000, depending on what your payment is, like you're probably going to get rid of that pretty quick, even just on the monthly minimum payments. Yeah. But after that, you know, they're in a whole different world, and depending on their income, they could probably save up some savings pretty quick, start transforming the situation from being here to now feeling like, all right, I have an actual footing with my finances. I can start to even look at other goals besides just getting out of debt.
Yeah. And I don't really even care about like that student loan right now. Like I'm mostly just concerned about those credit cards that are probably like 25%, you know, and then getting them on a good budget where they don't feel like they're so overwhelmed with like all the interest and stuff. Something to mention about collections, I think it's important for everybody to know, but you have to be very careful when you're working with these companies because they really, really, really are want your money. It's not like, they're not your friend. Yeah. So you have to be careful. Like, I know it'd be tempting to be like, hey, like I'll pay you $500. Would that work to settle this? And they'll say, sure. But like, make sure you get something like in writing that says that. And then, you know, do not send them, you know, your bank account information, you know, pay it with like whatever type of, you know, payment that you need to, but it's not something that's going to, you know, attach to your bank account because like I said, they're not your friend. They probably will just go in there and take out more money than they need to because you gave them access to do so. Right. So that's just something to keep in mind with those collections. But yeah, I think once this person like clears up their credit cards, which $9,000, like I know that seems like a lot, like even for somebody making $50,000, $60,000 a year, that's a lot, you know, and that seems like a lot. But I truly think if you just got like a side hustle and made like an extra like $500 a month, even like that's something that would just start chucking away at those super quickly. And you'd be done within like, I would say a year and a half, like you're done with those, you know?
All right, taking a quick break from today's episode, Lauren and I have some exciting news we'd like to share with you. If you're feeling stuck with your finances and don't know where to start, we have you covered with our one-on-one financial coaching.
These are no strings attached coaching sessions that you can sign up for today. No ongoing commitment. You simply book a session whenever you need one.
Each call is 90 minutes, and by the end of it, you'll have a clear budget to work with and a solid plan to start paying off your debt. Plus, we'll make sure you walk away with some awesome tools to keep you on track, including our budget dashboard and expense tracker, as well as our debt payoff optimizer.
And the best part, you'll get to work with both of us on the call. Together, we'll help you develop the best possible strategy forward, answer your questions, and make sure you feel confident about managing your money.
So if you're ready to get a handle on your budget and kickstart your financial journey forward, check out the link in the show notes to book your first session.
We can't wait to get started with you. Now, back to the episode.
I feel like I'm almost desensitized to like debts that are lower than like $20,000 or balances that are in like, you know, the single thousands of digits. Cause like, you know, situations where people have $180,000 of debt. and then a mortgage on top of that, and then kids on top of that, or whole family. Like, I'm like, this isn't bad at all. You know, like a year of really putting your head down and working, like you can be in a totally different spot. Whereas with some, and that's not to downplay these situations. These suck, right?
Yeah.
And you're not going to be like, oh, well, someone else is worse off, so I should be okay.
Yeah.
Like, this sucks if you're in this situation, but all that's to say is the light at the end of the tunnel is going to be a lot closer for you if you can put your head down, work, get on top of everything. Like you can get there so much quicker because of these balances.
Yeah, I know. We talk about like, oh, this is nothing. Because it isn't. For some people, this is be a walk in the park for them.
Yeah.
You know, and if this 24-year-old does not take control of this right now, they will end up in $180,000 of debt with a mortgage, with kids and stuff. You know, you have to fix it now, get good habits in place. And then I think you're golden from there. So hopefully they do. And then they'll be on the road to, financial freedom from here.
Yeah. Absolutely. And, you know, the situation kind of got me thinking, like, I feel like it's not just like the lifestyle changes that need to happen or like you said, potentially picking up a second job. Like, I feel like those things, they're hard, but I feel like what's even harder to deal with is like the emotional weight and like the anxiety that comes with this level of debt. Cause like we were saying, like this person doesn't have like crushing levels of debt, right? Maybe they're making $15 an hour. So it's proportionally, it's a big amount, but like, regardless of how much debt, I feel like people end up in these situations where any debt hanging over their heads, like the emotional toll is harder for them to overcome than it is to accept like, oh, I need to work another job, or oh, I need to make some lifestyle changes. Those things are hard too, but I feel like coming to terms with like either the shame, the anxiety, or just like almost like the level of depression that you could have from this, like that in itself is super hard as well.
Oh, for sure. And I think a lot of times it's because it was like stupid, silly purchases. So you feel like, why did I do that? And now I'm in this situation that sucks. And it's like, why did I make that decision? So I think that's a lot of the time what happens to people. I feel like in my debt-free journey, like, I think for me, it was just like, I just want to be debt-free so bad. So like, I don't know. I wasn't like upset with myself in this sort of way, but it was because I was paying off my car and my student loans. Both like were not terrible. You know what I mean? Like I wasn't in $100,000 student loans. Like I think I had like 40, I think at the end of the day, I paid off like 47,000 in that. And then I think like, my car, I originally financed it for like 17,000, but by the time I started my debt-free journey, I think I had like 7 or 8,000 left on it. And for me, I was like, that's not terrible, but like, I do want to be debt-free. So I think for me, it was more of like the emotional toll of like waiting 3 years to pay it all off while I was doing that journey. But yeah, I think a lot of times people, you know, it's easy to max out your credit cards and, you know, just the mindless spending. And then it's like when those bills are coming in, when you're seeing your bank accounts that has no money or you're overdrafting, it's like, why did I do that to myself? You know what I mean? Like, I'm so stupid for doing that. And I, you know, like we've talked about, that's not good or bad. It's, you know, you need to learn and then change your behaviors in the future. But yeah, it sucks for people. And I get that.
So then follow up to what you're saying. Do you think a lot of people end up tying like their self-worth to whatever their financial situation is? Like a lot of times, do you feel like people can view like debt because of stupid things that they might have done or purchases that they regret as like moral failures for who they are? Do you feel like there's a connection there?
100%. And I also think it's just the society we live in. You're taught that like, if you become the CEO of a company and you drive a Mercedes and stuff, like you are just like superior. You know what I mean? Like we tie so much of our like existence to like our careers, the amount of money we make, the clothes we wear, the cars we drive. Like, so it makes 100% complete sense that we are tying our self-worth to like our negative financial situation, you know, like you're making it mean something about you. What it doesn't, you know what I mean? But now we know why it feels so bad because we've been told our whole lives, like get a degree and make all this money and do good things in the world. And then we're like, shit, why do we have all this credit card debt? And like, why did I finance an $80,000 vehicle when it's getting me from point A to point B? You know what I mean? So yeah, for sure.
It's a tough conversation because there's like a fine line between like you should have some remorse for the situation, right?
Yeah.
Like if you racked up tons of debt and now you're like, if you're not thinking like, oh, this sucks, like why did I do that? There's probably a little bit of a problem there. Or if it's not giving you at least some stress or anxiety, like that's, you know, on one side, that is some motivation right there to improve the situation. But then if that's taken too far to where now you're saying like, well, I'm a shitty person because of this debt. It's like, no, you did some shitty things or some dumb things. That doesn't make you dumb. No. What you do now that you have this knowledge of, okay, this is a shitty situation. What you do now is really who defines what defines who you are, I should say.
Yeah. That's what I was going to say. Like, I think there's a difference between someone who, like, it's that girl in the beginning who was just like, yeah, you can just like take out 30,000 of debt and then it just goes away. Like there's a difference between someone like that and then someone who's like, listen, I did this in the past, but I know better now. And I'm going to like change and do different moving forward because I know better at this point. If you keep doing the same thing over and over again, then that's on you. Like, I don't have, sympathy for people like that continue to do the same thing and expect like a different result. But yeah, I think that there's, something to be said about somebody who, we all make mistakes at some level, but can we learn from them and change ourselves moving forward?
That is such a good comparison between the type of person that the girl in the first video is versus whoever this person is here is like, yeah, like you'd have a tough time convincing that person to get out of debt, improve their lifestyle, change their spending habits, and even to just get them to feel any sort of like regret or remorse for the situation. Whereas this person, they already did all that work for you. So now you just got to give them the plan. Now you just got to show them, okay, there is a way out of this. I feel like a lot of times the shame that people feel from this is like, that's what's stopping them from actually improving it. Like, it's almost like it's like a negative reinforcement. How would I say that? Like, it's like a cycle of negative reinforcement to where they feel shitty about their situation. So they do nothing. So it makes the situation worse. They feel shittier. They do not, it just keeps going in this circle where if you allow the shame to build up too much, or if you allow the regret to build up too much, it now shifts from being helpful to get you to want to change into the thing that's now keeping you there. I think there should be a healthy level of like shame and regret with situations like this. Like, yeah, you should be like, I shouldn't have done this, or I wish I didn't, and I want to fix this. But that's totally different than what I said earlier. Like, I'm a shitty person now, or like I will now, I can just never get out of situations like this. Like like I said, there's a fine line between identifying how much is too much that you're putting on yourself for this situation.
Yeah. And, you were talking about like, people like wanting to like fix it and move forward. But it's like, sometimes I feel like people are stuck in that cycle. They get stuck in that cycle because it is so painful to like look at and to like try to figure out. And then these people are probably having trouble like paying their bills, and like they're just like lost in a sea of credit card interest. So like they just don't pay attention to it because it's too painful to look at. So nothing ever really changes. So like, I feel like that's what prevents a lot of people from like actually, I think that's why a lot of people are just continuously in credit card debt and just like for years and years and years, and nothing ever changes because it is like that. It is like the pain of like looking at your bank accounts, and it's the pain of change. Like, obviously you're going to have to fix something, you know what I mean? And change a way of living. And that in itself is like super hard for a lot of people to do.
I was talking to someone about their finances, and they were telling me like how they were managing things. And yeah, they had some debt that was the goal, is to get out of debt, to hopefully buy a home, to, get their retirement on track. And like, they were walking me through like how they were managing their money, and you could tell they were like, I'm doing it like this because this is just, it's how it works.
Yeah.
It's how I make the numbers work. And I was like, I totally get that, like you're doing what you can with the knowledge that you have. But then let me ask you, like, is this really working then? Like, you're saying you do it like this because that's just how it needs to work, like to get the bills paid on time because they're paychecks and timing of everything. And they're like, well, I just need to do it that way. And I'm like, okay, like, is it working though? Or can we at least come to the agreement that like, no, this isn't working, right? It's what you're doing right now, and that's okay. But the way you're going about it, like, it's not getting you to where you want to go. It's pushing you further away from that, actually.
Oh, for sure. And I feel like, this was a big thing whenever I first started my debt-free journey. Like I said, change is hard. I think that's why a lot of people stay in debt. They don't want to change their life. They don't want to change like the way they're spending on things. This was a big change for me whenever I started my debt-free journey. Because I think I said this maybe the last episode, but I mentioned something about during my debt-free journey, like I didn't like spend on clothes, I didn't spend, Nick, it was crazy. Like I think I said like most of my money went towards my debt. Probably, 60-70% of my paycheck was going to pay off my debt each month. So there was some severe like, changes in like my day to day, which I think is super hard for a lot of people.
It's funny because we talked about this the last time, or whenever you brought that up. This was in the last few episodes, and like like, I think you and I both kind of agreed, like not much has changed since now being on the other end of like, you know, going through this financial journey, getting to a place where we feel good about our finances. Not a whole lot has changed. And it's like, I mean, I can remember when I bought this shirt like 6 years ago, and like, granted, it was a more expensive shirt. It's like a Patagonia shirt. So it did last a while, but like, dude, I can't remember the last time like I've bought a, you know, whole new wardrobe or new clothes or things like that. Like and it just speaks to what you were saying in that one episode. Like, there's the things we value, and then there's the things we just need to buy. And so we just, you know, whatever we can get, whatever, you know, fits the bill for that thing we just need to buy, right? Whether it's a car or clothes or all the other things that aren't as important, then we spend more generously in the things that are, which I think you and I both like are on the same page, that like building up our, you know, you building up your retirement. I know that's a huge thing for me, for you, me buying a home, like that's a huge thing for me. So like, those are the areas where we're going all in on those numbers, you know?
Yeah. Well, and just what you mentioned there, like, you know, my goal is more of like retirement. Your goal is more of like a house right now. I think, you know, the bigger question here is like, where do people go from here? And my thoughts on this are, you know, first would be like accepting where you're at and not like labeling yourself as good or bad, or shameful because you have this debt, but like accepting where you are and realizing that if you want things to be different, you're going to have to make some changes to, you know, get to that next level or get to the next stage of life where you're not feeling anxiety, guilt of all these things. Right. But then I also think, like I mentioned, like my biggest goal for myself was like, I want to get out of debt because like, I just want to stop putting so much money each month towards debt, but also because I wanted to be able to build up my retirement. I wanted to be able to do bigger things, go on more vacations and live my life more freely. The biggest thing here is like, I think a lot of people live just like paycheck to paycheck, just living month to month. They don't really think outside of those months. They're just trying to like survive. Nothing's going to change until like you actually have like a bigger goal to do so. And I know that sounds so cliche and we talk about that a lot, but it's true. Like, you know, there's so many things in life that we have to like, you know, we go to work so we can receive a paycheck, or else why else would we go to work? You know, to spend your money better and to do better with, you know, all of the debt and stuff you have to have a bigger goal in life other than just like living month to month and paycheck to paycheck, you know?
Or even worse than that, living for Friday and then hating Monday. You know, like a lot of people are in that cycle where it's like, I have to pay for these things, so therefore I have to go to work. Yeah. And because I hate that whole experience, therefore Friday's the best day of the week. You know, Friday and Saturday are awesome and Sunday kind of sucks. But like like you said, if you're stuck in that cycle of just like constantly everything you do revolves around, oh, cool, I got my paycheck now, I can go do the things that I'm used to doing. I've become accustomed to doing. Like, you're living that lifestyle however you are, and it's probably not getting you closer to where you want to go. Like, if you don't have that vision, it's not going to get anywhere. And like, dude, me and my wife have been working on buying a home for like 4 years, you know, and for some people that might be short, for some people that might be really long, but like this was a goal we had like 4 years ago. And I remember when we hit $10,000 in our home savings fund, right? That felt like forever ago, but it also didn't feel so long ago that I can't remember. Yeah. You know, like the time, I always say this too, like the time is going to pass. And so do you want to get to that road 4 years later and be able to look back and be like, man, I'm proud of what I did, or, hey, I could have even done more. Or do you want to get there and be like, I'm still doing the same shit that I was doing 4 years ago, and this kind of sucks, you know? Yeah. So it just made me think about my situation. So you said, you know, people are like, you know, living for Friday and then like hate going back to work on Monday. Like, I feel like for me, I personally do not like working. I like my job. It's fine. I love people I work with. I'm good at my job. It's okay. But like, do I want to be working? No. I really would just like to be a stay-at-home. Yes, a stay-at-home. Yeah. Just no kids, nothing, but just stay at home. That's what I want to do. You know, I would love to just do this podcast and just do like my passion project on the side. So for me, I'm taking the good income that I have, and I'm not a fire person. I'm not doing that much, but like I'm investing as much as I can so that my retirement comes a lot sooner than like 60. Like, I really don't want to work past like 45. I mean, I'll probably have to. Oh, that's a hefty goal there. It's a hefty goal. It's probably not going to happen, but you know, it's just, for me, it's just like, I would love to just like go volunteer at the animal shelter and just like do things at home and just like not work. Like, I'm not somebody who wants to climb the corporate ladder. Like, it's just not for me. I like my job. It's fine, but like, it's not, I don't want to be a working girly. But again, that drives me to want to be better with my money so I can like not have to do this forever. So like, if you're stuck in the cycle, like, and you're not changing your life, like,
then you are just going to be working and living for, to get to Friday and then hating Monday, like for the rest of your life. And you probably won't be able to retire if you don't change anything,
100%. And I totally get what you're saying, right? Like, it's okay that like you don't want to live for work,
yeah.
right? But because you have these big goals, and because you know what it's going to take on the financial side to get there, and at least it brings I'd imagine an appreciation to being able to do the job you do, and like you don't hate it, but maybe you'd rather be doing other things, of course.
Right.
But like it gives you that motivation and excitement to be able to approach work with saying, this sucks, but I'm doing it for this reason, and because I'm so diligently tracking everything, I can see the progress year after year after year.
Yeah, for sure.
Now, this whole conversation around debt, spicier question. Does debt mean, like, let's say, and granted, I haven't been on the dating scene for 8 years. Lauren, you've been married for, a few years longer than even I have. So take our conversation here with a grain of salt. But does debt, like if you were on the dating scene and someone, you were, interested in someone and they had debt, let's call it credit card debt, and it was like 15 grand. Is that a red flag?
Nick, I don't like being like mean and stuff like that, but I'm at a point, I'm in my middle 30s now. So let's say I was starting over. Yeah. I feel like if you have credit card debt at this point, like you've done, I guess I would have a conversation about it, but I would be like, I'm immediately skeptical about credit card debt. If you could say like something else and I might be okay with it. But like for me, credit card debt just shows like either you've put like some sort of emergency on there so you didn't have like the funds to be able to pay for that, or you just have really shitty spending habits. And for me, that's like an absolute no, just because of the way I am with my finances and where I've gotten myself financially. Like I'm not starting over with somebody, and I'm not going to try to change somebody's life. I don't know. That's just, I probably wouldn't, but I don't know, Nick. I feel like it'd be different if I was like 21 and like we're just trying to figure out our life and like maybe learn about credit cards and stuff like that. Could be different back then. In my middle 30s now, I'm like, no, I'm not changing anybody. I want someone to be on the same page as me, have the same values as me, especially on money. And I'm not dealing with that. What about you?
It would have to really depend. Like, okay, the type of debt absolutely would make a difference.
Yes.
You're still paying off student loans? Not a biggie.
Yeah.
I get that.
Sure.
And depending on the interest rate, I could see an argument for saying, well, if it's only 3%, I'm just going to hang on to it. It's like, all right, cool.
Yeah.
I can get that. But yeah, credit card debt. And if it was an emergency, all right, I get that. You had to pay for like a big medical bill or a car bill.
Yeah.
And you didn't have an emergency fund. A lot of people don't. But other than that, you would have been okay, right?
Yeah.
Okay, I can get that. But if it's like a constant cycle of overspending, buying random shit you don't need,
Yep.
And this is total side note, love my mom to death. She will send the most random things to us sometimes. Like for Easter, she sent over like this whole gift box. I'm like, I love it. I love that you're putting in the effort for doing that. It's made, like, I don't know if you've ever seen that Instagram post before, but it's like, my parents' homes looked like that. And so now my home will always forever look like that. And it's like, my mom was that person, had every shelf covered with stuff. Yeah. And I'm like, Mom, I'm just not that person. Like if she's going to try to give us stuff that she knows I won't want, she'll give it to my wife and say like, don't tell him until you get home. And cause like she tries to sneak it in cause she knows I'm not that kind of person. So bringing that back, if it was a bunch of random stuff like that and why you're in credit card debt, that'd be hard for me to swallow, like that'd be a hard pill.
Yeah, for sure. I'm just like, I don't know. I've never been in credit card debt. That's one thing I've told you, like, even from my low income household, like we just didn't have things. So like we've always like went without if we could not pay for it. My mom had a credit card where she like paid things and then would pay it off every month. So I just feel like trying to like help somebody through that and like change their whole mindset around like credit cards and stuff. It's just not for me at this point in my life, but maybe in my early 20s or something when we can like work on it together and like grow, that's perfectly fine. And I really hope that someone who's out there, they do want to grow and pay off their credit cards or whatever. But like, yeah, I'm not doing that at this point in my life.
I get it. And I see so many posts like that all over Reddit, like on the money pages or the advice pages where they're like, hey, I'm thinking of, marrying this person, or we are getting married and I just found out about their debt. Like, what should I do? And like, like it's tough to say one way or the other because like obviously you and I are both like down the road in our financial journeys.
Yeah.
And so coming to someone who's way at the beginning, it's like, man, I've been down that road. I don't know if I want to go through that again. That's a harder pill to swallow. But like if you two maybe haven't been so like diligent with your finances, or like, yeah, you may be in a decent financial spot. Like there's a conversation to be had about like, how did they get into that debt? And are you okay with that reasoning? Right. Like, because ultimately, like if you two are going to disagree about money at every corner, right? Like that's not going to make for a fun relationship, you know? But if there's like alignment on, okay, this is the goal now, like that can work.
Yeah. And side note, so I will say, you know, I'm not just being bitchy, but I will say that like when I first started my debt-free journey, my husband and I had been dating for maybe like 2 or 3 years at that point. I started my debt-free journey and got like real like invested in my finances. Like Nick, I used to hand write my budget. That's what I did my whole debt-free journey. I did not have an app. I did not have a spreadsheet. Like I hand wrote it. I would write every transaction I had. Like that's just how I did it. And I would sit down like weekly and look at it. So I knew where all of my debt was and what that looked like. So my husband, who was then my boyfriend, it made him start looking at his finances. Cause we never really, like, we were okay with our money and stuff. And like, again, we paid our bills and everything, but like, we never really talked about it on a deeper type of level. And I actually found out at that point that he had like, it's funny we even talked about this, but he had like 15 to 17,000 of credit card debt at that point. And so, you know, it was kind of like, he didn't really want to talk about it at first, but then he saw me like paying off all my debt so quickly that he actually like just went for it and just paid off all of his credit card debt. Now his credit card debt wasn't from bad spending. It was like, he was running, like a personal training business at the time and like was running Facebook ads. So I think they just like went on there and it just like built up pretty quickly. So he did get those paid off and was like, you know, debt free and better with money than I was like, you know, a year later. So like, that's how our situation worked. Like I was working through mine, he worked through his. But now I feel like is different if I were to be like on the dating scene again. But like, so I just wanted to say I'm not a bad person for for judging somebody with a credit card debt, you know?
Totally judging you right now. No, I totally get it. Like, and yeah, to be transparent, like my wife had like 50 grand of student loan debt before we got married. And like, it was a big goal for her that she's like, I want to get out of this debt before we get married. Like, I don't want to feel like I'm bringing that into the marriage. And I was like, hey, if that's what you want to do, I get it. But I would marry you with all that debt, you know, because like it matters more about the alignment on the values, right? Like if you're both aligned, like the financial, the intricacies of your current financial situation can be solved. And as a team, it'll probably be solved a whole lot faster, you know, but like, that's where I think it's hard is when your financial situation is a representation of your poor spending habits. And if there's not a change there or a clear change, it's like, that's when it's a real easy no for me. You know?
Oh yeah. And if I like feel like back then, like if he wouldn't have changed or just been like, I don't care about it. Like, I don't care what this looks like and never had taken control of it. Who knows if we would even be married. Cause I feel like at that point, like I'm going like, you know, straight up with my finances. And like, I just feel like if you're just like stuck over here, like we're never going to be on the same page with it. So like,
the alignment of the values isn't there. Right. And it's hard to build off that.
Yeah.
I totally get that. And, you know, we've talked a lot about like the emotional weight that debt can have. Even at the beginning, we talked about some of the crazy advice around debt that we've seen. Like if someone's in this situation where they're feeling like they're stuck with debt, like I guess like real tactically, like what should they be focusing on? Like where should they go first? If they're in that place of like, I'm really down on myself, I don't know where to go, the world feels like it's closing in on me.
Yeah, this is a great question. And I feel like I'm not going to give like a step-by-step answer to this, but because my first answer and the first thing that really popped in my head was the person's going to need to find acceptance within themselves, but also patience. Because I think we get so, especially people who are like really fed up with themselves and just like really want to change and feel like there's no way forward in this. They want something to change like immediately. That's why we do. I think that's a lot of times why people want to do debt consolidation. They want a really quick fix. They want this to be gone. You have to understand that like, it's going to take time. Like you need the acceptance of like, okay, this is where we're at right now. And this is where we're going to start. But also I need to be patient because I know that this process is going to take a long time. I did not get into this debt overnight. I'm not going to be able to get out of it overnight, you know? So I think that's like, you know, you can give a step-by-step of, you know, do a budget, blah, 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 I'll do this. But like, you need to understand those two things first, like acceptance and like patience, because I've said this 4,000 times, but like it took me 3 years, almost 3 years to pay off my debt. Like that was a long time. Like you cannot just think like, I need to fix this next week, because it's not going to happen. And it's easy to get into that sort of mindset when you're looking at like this mountain that's in front of you of debt or whatever. And you're just like, where the hell do I go? I'm like at the bottom and I have to get the whole way to the top to like conquer this. And like, it feels overwhelming. So that's why I'm like, patience came to mind for me. Cause I'm like, I really feel like a lot of people want it done now and and that's not realistic at all.
I think patience is such a understated component to this. Like that's a key component to this, because depending on what your income is, especially like progress, could look great, like if you're just analyzing the situation, but it could still be slow.
Yeah.
A lot of times these situations, if you're going from way down in the hole and you want to end up in a totally different place, like you're talking years potentially, right? Like everyone's situation could be different. Maybe they had built up some savings, maybe they have some help from someone, whatever. Like, and so these things can move quicker, especially if you have a great income, right? But like, I think a lot of people need to come to terms with this is going to take time, right? Like you can get into debt real quick, but to get out of it is going to take a lot more hard work. But I think the biggest thing that comes to mind for me, especially like when I'm talking to people and they're like, well, how do I do this? I'm like, well, let's forget the how. Like, why do you want to do this?
Yeah.
Why? Right? If you don't have a good reason for why, that patience isn't going to come easy. Or the motivation when you're 6, 7, 8 months down the road, a year and a half down the road, like that motivation is going to be gone, And so you need to be able to fall back on, I'm doing this for a greater purpose, right? There's like you had said, there's a vision there. Or like when we're talking about like healthy marriages in terms of finances, like there is a vision out there for where everyone's working towards, And so if you don't have that why, like you could have the best plan on paper and it's just not going to matter, because you're going to lose that excitement and that motivation 6 months down the road or a few years down the road.
Absolutely. Because what is the difference between the past, however many years you've been living this way, and the month ahead? Like if there's no reason why, you're not going to change,
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, just so that people don't think we're only getting conceptual on them. Of course, the quick answers are going to be like, you got to analyze the situation. Like what's your income? What's the debt? What are the expenses?
Yeah.
Throw that all into a really solid budget.
Yeah.
And once you determine like how much you can throw towards the debt, it gets real simple, or at least becomes a simple equation at that point. I have this amount of debt. I can throw this much at it. Here's how quickly I can get out of it. 2 ways you can approach it. Like you either pay the highest balance or the highest interest, or the lowest balance or the highest interest rate, If you're working this plan though, and you have the patience, you have the vision forward, the exact route that you take is not going to be the game changer there.
No.
It's going to be those 2 parts. It's going to be, am I patient enough to see this through? And do I have a purpose for why I'm doing this? Like those are going to be the big parts there.
Yeah. And I think if anybody wants to pay off their debt, they could easily find like a debt payoff like calculator on the internet or some type of spreadsheet. It's not about the numbers at all. I feel like that's like the part that's like the easiest, is to like actually figure out your numbers. But like it's all of those other things we just talked about that's the hardest for people, and the change that comes with like all of those things and like your lifestyle and stuff. Like it's rarely the numbers. Like you and I could create a budget for every person on the earth and be like, do this, this, and this. If there's no vision, if there's no acceptance, if there's no like gentleness with yourself to like change moving forward, it's not going to happen.
Absolutely.
Why does everyone stay in debt? Because they, it's hard work, and it's more than just like do X, Y, Z,
100%. The path forward is simple, but it's not easy, and you got to be able to fall back on stuff.
Exactly.
Well, I think that wraps up today's episode. And so as always, if you got a good laugh, if you found some value, if you could consider subscribing and sharing this with a friend, because that's going to be the best way you can help us grow.
Yeah. And if you want to have your money questions answered on the show, you can visit our website, justanothermoneypodcast.com, and click the submit a question button. And don't forget to join us for another episode of Just Another Money Podcast. The information, opinions, and recommendations provided on this podcast are for entertainment purposes only and do not constitute professional financial advice. Any financial decisions you make based on the content of this podcast are your responsibility. We strongly recommend consulting with a licensed financial advisor or other qualified professional before making any significant financial decisions. By listening to this podcast, you acknowledge that we are not liable for any financial outcomes.